And then the most important part is adapt your message accordingly. That cultural alignment is what's going to accelerate product market fit and growth more than any technical decision that you'll ever make.
Welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast, where experts discuss international content management, product localization, and global expansion. I'm Katerina from Undertow. We create and manage localization programs for B2B SaaS companies so they can grow globally. Today, our founder Nicola Calabrese will be talking with Anca Greve, Senior Director of Global Expansion at Salesforce, where she leads localization across Slack and other key customer experience like learning certification programs like Trailhead. Together, they will dive into how localization evolves from a reactive function to a strategic growth deliverer, how to scale workflows with AI, and what it really takes to deliver a truly global product experience. So, let's dive in.
Hi, Anca, and welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me and for talking to me today about the subject that we all know and love. I'm really happy to be here, so excited to talk more.
That's amazing. And before we jump into today's topic, would you mind tell us a little bit about yourself and your career?
Yes. So I'm Anca Greve, the Senior Director of Global Expansion at Salesforce. I'm the product manager for our internal translation management system, and I lead localization across Slack, Trailhead certification, and success for Salesforce. So I have a bit of a dual role, a PM and your traditional kind of LPM manager, which is a very, very interesting. It's a very interesting duality. A bit more about myself, I guess, in my career. I started out as a translator, and I speak a couple of languages. I worked as a translator in college, and I then went on to study global affairs, worked at the UN for a little bit before finding this field that everyone seemed to know about, except for me, of localization. And I've been here ever since. I love the community we have and the way we kind of have to adjust with the times constantly since I started over 10 years ago. And it's been so cool to be part of this community and to learn from all of the wonderful people that are also part of it. So that's me.
Yeah, it's a really nice, I really like the community, in general. I really love it.
Yeah, people are great. Very helpful.
It's very, let's say, easygoing, It's not too stiff.
Yes, yeah,
and everybody's friendly, And can you walk us a little bit through what Slack localization program looked like when you started in your role versus how it is today, where it is today? And where were the biggest gaps that you identify, or how do you prioritize what to fix and when?
Yes. So when I started at Slack, it was a much smaller company than today's Salesforce, 80,000 employees. The startup journey at first was very linguist driven. You don't have a defined role. You just kind of see the momentum. We saw the momentum that Slack was picking up across the world. And we saw that Japan in particular was very organically adopting this product. And so that's when the wheels started turning for our leadership around localization. So because of the nature of Japan, localization was largely a linguist-driven process at first, highly reactive as well. Whereas today, we've moved over time through a couple of shifts, but today it's really an engineering-led, scalable program with automations and LLM in the loop so that we are built into our product foundation from day one versus be a more reactive component of the product journey.
And obviously, localization sometimes gets treated as a translation problem, but obviously a company like Salesforce is clearly much more complex, as you said as well. It grew quite a lot from the, let's say, startup days. So how do you define the scope of localization nowadays? And what do you think a complete localization strategy should include beyond just translating UI text, a user interface?
Yeah, I think it means delivering a fully equivalent customer experience, equivalent to for us, I think English US, not just the translated UI, but really parity in features, support, context, adjustments where needed, because our customers deserve the same product regardless of language. And nobody else is going to advocate for that if we don't. So I think it's really important for localization to, in addition to processing the workflows that generate the true localization, I think our job is also to be these advocates for the users we have around the world. So I kind of think that we go beyond just executors. I think maybe we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I think there's also a strategy component to our roles.
And can you give maybe some example of like areas that are included? You mentioned strategy, and anything else that like wouldn't come, let's say, top of mind when somebody maybe think about localization?
I think both strategy and the technology piece, like we really, I think for one of the things that I've encouraged my team to do consistently is to really look at what is the problem that you want to solve. It's usually more than translation. It's usually a facilitation of generating the right message for the right audience at the right time. This is very general, but like I think that's what people really want us to solve. The translation is the output and it might be the end result, but like shepherding the journey to get there is our job. And I think kind of looking at all the steps and not just like how do you facilitate a Japanese localization project, but also like how do you facilitate the intake? How do people let you know where you need to come in, what you need to translate, what you need to take into account? And how do you alleviate that handoff is really important, because I think as more and more, this world we live in today is very AI centric. And when people think of AI, a lot of times they think about the step of, I have a product, I want to take it globally. So I need all these other languages, but I can just use Google Translate, right? Or Gemini or Claude or whatever the model is. And it's like, I think our job is to kind of tell people you could, but the translation is the easiest part of the whole thing. It's really managing workflows and processes and data at scale. Like, how do you do that? A lot of people we've had these conversations repeatedly internally, and it's like, I don't think people think that far. So when we present that to them and we say at some point the scalability is going to come to bite you in the butt, have you thought about that? And they're typically like, no, I haven't. And that's when I feel like that's when the aha moment is for our stakeholders and it really clicks for them. And that's when the relationship kind of changes. We're seen as a strategic partner versus just like as an afterthought. So that's kind of also how we went from reactive to really designing these processes for people that make it super easy for them to engage with us, where like they just push a button and then the translations either come back to them or they see their assets localized or whatever it may be.
To be honest, I see the difference in conversation when somebody has already like hit that wall of scalability and somebody who hasn't got there yet. So because they might be doing things like, yeah, I'm sure it's not like the most efficient way to do this, but it kind of works. Yeah. So we're going to keep doing that until it reaches a point that you cannot do that. Like it's not possible. You realize like, oh, actually, I want to, let's say, launch more than one campaign per year, and I cannot do that with the current system. Or maybe we want to add a new market, and it's a whole other thing because everything is like duplicated for every single market. So, but if somebody already banged through that and they seem like they already hit the wall, they understand it's easier. Unfortunately, to be honest, it makes it so much easier if somebody already went through that pain of saying like, this is really annoying to do. It's like with the product as well, like first launch, it's usually a pain in the ass because it's done like manually. Then any updates on top of it is just more pain.
Yeah, and I think like faster translation is a message we're all hearing probably, but it's really I think the question should be, how do we use AI and LLMs to automate this connecting points, connective process, whatever you want to call it, between different disciplines, between engineering and content and QA. Like typically there isn't just one person producing content and then localizing it. And there's a whole mix of people in the loop. So I think that's the real unlock, is how can we facilitate bridging those gaps, connecting those people in a way where the localization workflow becomes parallel to whatever's happening in product or in marketing. And I think one of the things that surprised me the most is once you remove the handoffs, you go faster, but you also surface quality issues earlier. You're able to be more of a partner. You reduce work or rework rather, and you facilitate collaboration across teams, which I think in localization, you're always kind of like that connective tissue between teams. But again, that's the real unlock when teams realize, oh my gosh, it just works. And I think AI can help us there. I think it just has to be thoughtfully implemented.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about like the specific bottleneck and pain points that you can address with AI. You mentioned a little bit the handoff, so like making sure that it's kind of easy to send a request and how that flows throughout the different departments.
Yes. So yeah, I can talk more about that because now recently, as I mentioned in my About Me, I inherited a couple of work streams that are at different levels of maturity in terms of integration with the rest of the company, with the TMS that I manage. So it's really interesting to say what point in their journey people are at. And with some of the work streams, I think we're hitting a point where it's like, yeah, this is not going to work for stakeholders. They're already looking to eliminate, again, this friction point. So like, how do we combat getting known as a friction point? And with Slack, the reason I think we're so successful is we've really thought about what's the development process and when do engineers really need their strings? Like, when do they run pseudo translation and can we replace that with real copy? And like, again, I told my team way back in, because a lot of the folks that I originally hired are still around. And there's one of the principles that I operate under is you never delay a launch and you just make it work for people. Like, people don't have to know the intricacies of our process. They just have to, again, like push a button or fill out a form and not worry about translation, and then it just comes back when they need it. So we thought about that with engineers, and we realized that the way they need their strings is pretty quickly so that they can test and iterate. And so what we call our web app flow, which is the strings in the UI and on the website. And if you use Slack so I'm talking about Slack specifically, because that's the most mature and automated workflow, because that's the one I managed from the get-go. But if you look at our product strings in the app, those we localize, on the fastest cadence, usually within 24 hours because of the speed of iteration that way back when I started was kind of like table stakes, So we had to sort of understand, like, if we want to be part of this process, if we don't want to be this reactive part of the org, then we really need to give engineers what they need as soon as they need it. So that's what we kind of indexed on. With other work streams, it's a little bit more difficult because I think, and one of the challenges we're dealing with now is this constant iteration from marketing content where it's really tricky. And like, how do you make sure that your users in another country see this wonderful tagline that they've thought about for months that they kept iterating on and changing? And it's typically like longer than a tagline, but how do you ensure that you're being as thoughtful with what you're presenting to a user in Germany as you are with what you're presenting in the user at the like, what does marketing need? Where do they need us to come and advise? And that's a little bit different than the process we have with our engineers and with our product groups. But it's also we have to move very quickly, and go-to-market speed is something we track. We try and put as much through the TMS, as much in continuous localization as possible. And we are slowly trying to figure out how we can move to a publish first, QA later model, where again, the stakeholders have what they need. And then we kind of in the background iterate after. And that's a huge risk that I think we, as localization professionals I don't know how, we have differing levels of comfort with that, but I think that's like the direction we're moving in.
Sorry to interrupt your listening, but do you want to grow your B2B SaaS in international markets? Because every country is different, and what users value in one market doesn't necessarily matter in another one. At Undertow, we help B2B SaaS companies like yours succeed in their international expansion. We create customized localization strategies that address the unique challenges of each market. In this way, you can effectively attract, engage, and convert customers worldwide. Visit undertowlanguages.com to find out more. And now back to the show.
And my question with that is that, are you looking for that both in product and marketing, or maybe just in product, or just understand this, let's say publish first and QA later? Is it this would apply just for product? Would be apply for marketing as well? For both? Or
I think it's worth mapping out where your engagement is. And it's worth both internally and externally, frankly. Like, you want to support the stakeholders that have the most pressing needs, the most, again, like iterative needs, but you also want to support your highest engagement surfaces in your highest, priority markets. So there's like it's like, we could make a blanket statement and just say like, we'll go publish first everywhere. But I think even within that, like different pieces of content should get different levels of QA. So like the content that's context rich is probably an excellent candidate. It is an excellent candidate for an LLM, maybe even a raw LLM output. But then your I think more the marketing content perhaps, or maybe even some parts of your product, like the UI against surfaces that people see, like those I think you probably should treat differently, unless, we're part of this is like, we're kind of going through this, developing our own scorecards and our own mechanisms to get to this publish first mindset. And I think that part of this is kind of like learning what is acceptable. Part of it is prompting the LLM to create the right output. I think when we talked last time, I mentioned that our TMS has a prompt interface, so we can do all of that within it. Part of it is having like the right resources that you can feed the LLM. And like the way we have our glossaries set up doesn't really work. There's a lot of rethinking, a lot of segmenting. And then there's also like, and one of the things that we should make a lot more time for, I think, is like asking the questions that force us to rethink how we've done things so far. Like this glossary piece, we've seen that like the way we set up our glossary, the way maybe most people set it up, is not the most effective way to prompt the LLM. So like, what does it actually need to maintain brand consistency? And like I said, like maybe have the UI, you engineer the prompt in such a way where over time you don't even touch that part of the UI because it's got all the context and the right inputs, and it generates the level of quality that you would expect of that particular product surface. All of that is like something we are constantly thinking and talking about in my teams internally. And of course, with that comes like build that into the TMS for me. And I think that's another interesting conversation.
Yeah, because that's the thing, like the glossaries and style guides and any other like reference materials that in the past were, let's say, thought out just for humans. Now they need to take into account both humans and LLMs. And sometimes they make it, let's say, fit for the LLMs, makes it easier as well for humans. Like instead of like 100-page style guide, you get like a more, let's say, summarized version with the very crucial stuff in there. But it's still like something that needs to be rethought as well, like the way glossaries are structured and organized, the concepts in terms of how they should be organized and structured. Maybe we're not there yet, but we will get to a point where maybe it needs to be, I would say, like more branching out and connecting concepts in there. Something a little bit more sophisticated, or maybe not just sophisticated, just different on how it is currently structured, which was most of the time just a direct equivalence, like this terms means this, because obviously human will see that they don't need too many information sometimes to understand, like, I don't need to use that now here. But the LLM needs like to have more clear guidance around that, for example.
Yeah, when we started testing content and we saw the output and we were like, this is not good enough for us. Let's improve our we found that actually didn't work. And it really made us think, again, what is the problem that we really want to solve? And then what is the right design for the solution? We can't just like pick and choose these like preset solutions anymore. We really have to go back to the drawing board and focus on the specific thing we're solving, and kind of have a debate sometimes, bring people that maybe wouldn't otherwise be included in those debates in from other other teams, and like really engage in how do we do this, where again, it's like sustainable and scalable and removes those friction points, but also it's really hard for me to compromise on quality. So I think we probably do a ton of work thinking about because for, a lot of people, it's like, it's okay if it's not perfect. And we're like, no, it's not. We need to make it so we do think a lot about that aspect because again, the whole point is to give your user an experience that maybe we haven't thought about it for the many months that marketing has thought about it for the US, but as close as that as possible. And so we kind of go overboard with all of these discussion and debates, although I do find them really interesting. So I like it, but it is something that we're doing more of that we didn't really do before. So it's interesting.
And when it comes to managing complexity as well, how do you, when thinking about entering a new market and what priority to give to each different markets, how do you balance the opportunity with obviously the complexity or the cost of launching a new language or entering in a new region? Because now, especially with AI, it's let's go everywhere at once, but there are still considerations to be done about that.
Well, you only have a shot to get this right, so you better do it. But so I have a framework that I implemented where we have markets with a lot of potential, where the size of the market, the TAM, is pretty big, but also the level of effort to go to market is typically not straightforward. So maybe you really need to think about resellers or partners. Maybe government regulations make it a little bit difficult. Maybe there's product complexity for maybe low bandwidth environments that you need to design for. So there are those markets, but the TAM is very attractive. Those are markets with potential. And then the other bucket are markets with momentum, where the market is a little bit smaller. So the return of investment is probably not as big, but it's going to be easier for us as a company to enter or grow that market. The main strategic question is what are markets with a little bit of potential and a little bit of momentum where those things intersect, where we get the ROI we've classified those markets based on potential, based on momentum. And typically momentum is a very marketing heavy investment where again, you've maybe entered the market, you're looking to grow it. And that's a real marketing side question because we can localize strings campaigns all day, but if there isn't a cohesive plan and the alignment, the investment commitment from these key teams, you're not going to be successmal. So I think depending on whether a market has potential or momentum, potential is typically, like I said, a more operational, legal entity question heavy, product probably rework heavy component. That stuff takes that stuff takes a really long time to discuss. So we've indexed on these markets with momentum. And because we've indexed on that, I think it's more of a marketing question. And market prioritization generally is a business case. Again, you need the revenue signal, but you also need the investment commitment to really be successful.
Can you just clarify what you mean by the momentum? Is it where you're seeing, say, users already asking for localization?
Yes.
Or?
Yes, and it's not just localization. It's you see organic traction for your product. Typically there's a word of mouth component. You meet with customers and they already kind of know what you do. I think it goes back to awareness also. You might have some awareness in potential markets, but the regulatory blockers are or the usability or the product market fit blockers are just larger. Whereas in markets with momentum, it's just that, you already have momentum. So you might as well invest in continuing to grow that market. So again, that becomes an alignment. It's not necessarily a product question because again, the product already works, but it's more of a marketing investment question. How much are you willing to invest over what period of time to capitalize on the momentum that we're already seeing?
And connected to actual product development. So what's the let's say the relationship between your localization team and product development at Slack? How do you ensure that localization considerations are built into product decision early rather than just being at the very end?
Yeah, so I think, again, we embed localization into product development we treat it as a quality of life dimension for our users, not a delivery step. The same way you wouldn't ship with broken accessibility, you shouldn't ship without a localization ready architecture, right? So, and we make it easy for developers to localize their strings. So I think that's really it, is like, this isn't just an extra step you take. This is table stakes for the users, and you cannot ship a broken experience. So that's kind of what the concepts I operate under.
You mentioned something like parallel running workflows. Is there something like while development is doing their thing, localization is running in parallel, or was this something different?
Yes, I think it's like just this immediate intake of strings at a regular cadence. I think the continuous localization cycle really helps us there, where we've automated pulling the diffs or the deltas in whatever strings have been committed into our systems. And whether we use, again, for different parts of the app, different piece of content, whether we use AI or not, like, we return them almost instantly for some variants, for some languages and variants, or we commit to a very, very fast return cadence for others, where, again, when we return the strings, somebody, checks them over and then commits them, and they're there. And we do that for experiments, and we do that for launches. I think developers are also really good at letting us know when they don't have what they need, and they work with us to adjust, but typically like less than a day is our goal, so that they have what they need, or instant, depending on the language and the content type.
And connected to this, I want to ask you, like, obviously introducing AI can speed a lot of things up, but there's also the risk, as you already mentioned, like misinterpretation, brand voice inconsistency. So how do you maintain quality? Is it more about like the, let's say, content segmentation that you already mentioned, or how do you go about this?
Yes, I think there will always be certain languages and certain content types and parts that we will have a human in the loop for. I think AI gives us speed, but setting the right quality frameworks in place for us is really important. And I think quality control is not just linguistic expertise, but it's linguistic expertise with the awareness of brand guidelines and with the engagement in continuous feedback loops from either internal in-market experts or, in an ideal scenario, users. So I think that the fact that we can have speed through our LLM enables us to focus more on those other pieces of setting the right quality frameworks in place, engaging in feedback loops, and iterating on what we've done, iterating typically on the prompt to get the right output.
And for SaaS company just starting to think seriously about international expansion, what's the one localization mistake you see most often, and what would you tell them to do differently from day one?
I would encourage measuring everything. I think the biggest mistake that I've seen people make is skipping measurement. Without clear metrics tied to localized markets, tied to the activities that you are undertaking in certain markets, from day one, it's very hard to prove ROI. It's very hard to prove ongoing investment. For us, we are a global company. There's a lot of thought that goes into shipping global first. But I think it really is worth measuring everything, particularly experiments from the get-go. So that even though some locales might take a while for the data to bake, we might have to extend, I think having the infrastructure to help you measure as much as possible is absolutely critical. So that's what I would encourage future leaders to do as they enter global markets.
And regarding metrics, are they localization-specific metrics or like more, let's say, general SaaS metrics, like the number of active users or signups?
Yes. I think usage is a key metric. And I think indexing on like usage and everything that is under that, for us, it's monthly or weekly active users. It's like you say, different impressions on marketing, how many people signed up, particularly if you're operating under a self-serve model, like how many people have you taken through whatever the metrics in your self-serve funnel are. What is your engagement? What is your like measuring every part, ideally, of a user's journey for every market, or if you can do every market, because again, it's really hard to get statistical significance in some cases, but if you can just do a region, like, or even if you can find similarly sized market opportunities and then extrapolate from there, like those are the metrics that you should pay attention to. It's been very difficult for us to look at just revenue because again, in aggregate, our international markets make up a ton more revenue than just the US, right? But we don't always look at things in aggregate. We look at this versus this, and then the US always wins. So I think like looking at engagement and the user's journey and like kind of quantifying little lifts that you see from the actions that you take, that's where you can identify the points in the journey where you can turn up either experimentation or you can capitalize on maybe having a promo here or, you know, a call to action here. So measuring and like really knowing where you can index on turning those levers up.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is then that you don't need like to create new metrics. But I do agree it's not even fair like to compare let's say your home market, especially when it's the US, with like a new localized market. That's you've done so much effort in the home market before you even reached out a new one. So
definitely don't create new metrics, but you have to understand and use the business metrics. And I would even say the department-specific metrics, because again, marketing will measure different things than product. And the more you can partner with the folks who have that data, or I guess this is a SaaS, like get that data. If you're the CEO of this SaaS company, the more successful you'll be because you'll know those inflection points and how to capitalize on those opportunities.
Looking ahead, how do you see AI changing the localization function at Slack over the next 2-3 years? Will your team structure and processes look fundamentally different?
Yeah, I think I think that we'll have more quality ownership. Again, we have these like strategic components to our jobs where we're in product conversations when new features are developed, and we kind of have to have the data to enable us to say, this is going to work here, but not here. So I think there's more strategy, there's more quality ownership, there's a technical component, understanding, again, what stakeholders need and engaging with the right people to facilitate and remove that friction from their workflow. So I think, the headcount model changes, but the human judgment required goes up, not down. And engaging with those stakeholders, assessing, again, their problem and designing for a solution for them is critical. And I think part of the way I say it this way is because I also have to think as a product manager in terms of what my internal stakeholders, all the localization needs that I support with the TMS, what do they need? And a lot of times, again, they come and they say things like, I want X. And then we have to encourage them to really think about, why do you want that? Like, what is define for me what this address is and that's the human judgment. Like, that is something that is irreplaceable, I think. So that's probably going to happen for more and more of my team is quality, getting a little more technical, thinking more as a product person because of the way we were set up and the tools we have, and being more of a strategic partner.
And if you were to give one piece of advice to a SaaS founder who's about to launch their first international market, what would it be? Like, what's the biggest mistake you warn them against?
Talk to your customers. Like, spend real time understanding what customers in that market actually care about and want and need, and maybe understand, again, maybe it's not what they say they want or need, but maybe there's like a deeper undercurrent there, and try and really understand what your product will do for them. And then the most important part is adapt your message accordingly. That cultural alignment is what's going to accelerate product market fit and growth more than any technical decision that you'll ever make.
I think that's a great way to close. So Thank you so much
Great.
for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Nicola. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us today. The Multilingual Content Podcast is powered by Undertow. We help B2B SaaS companies grow in any language. Get in touch if you want to know more. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episode. If you want to support us, remember to give 5 stars to the podcast. See you next time.